Welcome to Vintage Horror, where the darkness comes alive. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? What time is it in your world right now? And most importantly, how does this tale make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and brace yourself for a chilling journey into the unknown. Countryside Road Encounter. The clock on the dashboard glowed a faint green, 11:47 p.m. Its numbers flickering now and then as the old sedan rattled down the unpaved road, gravel crunching sharp under the tires, a staccato rhythm that matched the thudding in my chest. I'd been driving for hours, the kind of hours that blur into a haze of headlights and shadow. My eyes dry and stinging, lids heavy, like they'd been stitched with lead. The fields on either side stretched endless, dark, foggy smears of gray under a sky that swallowed stars, the moon a dull smudge behind thick clouds, barely leaking light. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles pale, palms slick with sweat, despite the chill seeping through the cracked window. My breath fogging faint in the cab, a plume that curled and vanished against the windshield streaked glass. Home was still far, too far, and the map app on my phone had died an hour back. Signal lost, screen black, leaving me with nothing but this road, this endless ribbon of dirt and stone cutting through nowhere. The engine coughed, a low, wet growl, and I pressed the gas harder, the pedal stiff under my boot, the car lurching forward with a groan that vibrated through the seats, through my spine. I'd taken this shortcut, some half-remembered route from years ago, because the highway was clogged, jackknifed semi-blocking lanes, red and blue lights flashing in the rear view like a bad omen. This road was supposed to save time, but it stretched on, unlit, unmarked. No signs to guide me, just the twin beams of my headlights, slicing through fog that clung thick to the ground, swirling slow like it was alive, breathing. The air smelled damp, earth and rot, slipping through the window's gap, a sour whiff that stung my nose, mixed with the stale coffee in the cup holder, its cold dregs sloshing faint as I hit a rut, the car jolting hard, suspension creaking loud. I rubbed my eyes, fast, rough, blinking against the blur, the road ahead, a tunnel of light and haze, the fields on either side swallowed by dark, their edges lost to the fog's greedy sprawl. My neck ached, stiff, sore, a knot that pulsed with every turn of my head, my shoulders hunched tight, boots heavy on the pedals, the leather creaking as I shifted. I wanted music, something to drown the silence, but the radio spat static, a hiss that clawed at my ears, so I'd switched it off, leaving just the engine's drone and the gravel's crunch, a loop that gnawed at my focus. I muttered to myself, almost there, voice hoarse, cracking, a lie to fill the quiet, to keep my mind from drifting to how alone I was out here, how the last house I'd passed was miles back, its porch light a fading pinprick in the mirror. Then I saw it, up ahead, maybe 50 yards, a flicker in the fog, a shape, hunched near the road's edge, half lost in the mist, a dark smear against the gray. My foot eased off the gas, instinct, reflex, the car slowing, tires grinding softer now, headlights stretching long, their beams catching something. Two bright points, sharp and sudden, like coins glinting in the dark. Eyes, reflective, unblinking, staring straight into the light, glowing unnatural against the figure's crouched form. My breath hitched, a quick, shallow gasp, hands tightening on the wheel, the plastic creaking under my grip as I squinted, heart thudding louder, a dull roar in my ears. An animal, I thought. Had to be. A deer, a fox. Yeah, something caught in the glare. But it didn't move, didn't bolt, just stayed there, low and still, too upright, too human in its outline. I tapped the brake, gentle, tentative. The car rolling slower now, gravel popping faint under the tires. The engine's growl softening to a rumble that shook the frame. The figure didn't shift, just crouched, those eyes locked on me, a piercing through the fog, a steady burn that didn't flicker, didn't fade. My mouth went dry, tongue sticking to the roof, a bitter taste creeping up. My neck prickling sharp, a jolt that ran down my spine, cold and electric. I leaned forward, eyes straining, windshield fogging faint for my breath, trying to make it out. Too tall for a dog, too still for a deer. Its shape blurred, but solid. Shoulders hunched, head tilted slight, like it was waiting. For me. The car crawled. 10 yards. 5. The headlights washing over it now, cutting through the mist, and I saw more. Pale skin, a glint of it under the beams, arms hanging low, thin and limp, knees bent inward. A posture that didn't fit right, didn't make sense. No coat, no gear, just a loose, shapeless mass. Fabric, maybe, flapping faint in the windless air. My gut twisted, a cold, nauseous knot, fingers trembling as I gripped the wheel harder, the road narrowing ahead, dirt shoulder shrinking to a thin strip. Nowhere to swerve if it moved. I didn't want to stop. Every nerve screamed to keep going, but the car shuddered. A hiccup in the engine, a sputter that jerked my focus to the dash. Fuel gauge dipping low, needle twitching, near empty. I cursed, low, sharp, voice shaking as I glanced back up, the figure closer now, maybe 20 yards, its eyes still burning, unblinking, cutting through the fog like twin beacons. It hadn't moved, or had it? The distance felt wrong, shorter than it should have been, the road stretching endless behind it, fog swallowing the dark. My headlights flickered, brief, sudden, a whine from the battery, and for a second the beams dimmed, the figure vanishing into shadow, only those eyes lingering, floating free in the black. My chest tightened, breath shallow, fast, hands fumbling for the high beams, flicking the switch. Light surging back, bright and harsh, flooding the road. It was there, closer still, 15 yards. Standing, now, not crouched, taller than I'd thought, thin and rigid, arms dangling past its knees, head cocked sharp. Those eyes, reflecting the glare, wide and wet, like glass catching fire. My foot slammed the brake. Too hard, the car skidding, gravel spitting loud, back end fishtailing as I yanked the wheel left, tires slipping, a sickening lurch as the sedan spun half around, headlights slashing wild across the field, beams catching fog and emptiness, the engine stalling with a choke, silence crashing in. I sat there, breath fogging thick, heart slamming, staring at the dash, the clock blinking 11:50 p.m. The world outside still, too still. The figure behind me now, somewhere in the dark. I didn't look. Not yet. Hands shaking as I twisted the key, the engine coughing, refusing to catch. A weak whine that died fast. The air grew colder, sharp, biting, seeping through the window. My breath, a heavy plume that hung in the cab, fogging the glass. My neck burned, prickling fierce. A pull to turn, to check. But I fought it, eyes locked on the windshield, on the field ahead, empty and gray. The road lost to the turn. The gravel had stopped crunching. No wind, no sound, just my pulse, loud and fast. And a faint, wet plip, plip, plip. From under the hood, coolant or oil. Something leaking slow. I twisted the key again, desperate now. The starter grinding, a metallic screech that cut the quiet, but no life, no hum. The car dead. Then I heard it, a scrape, soft but close. Gravel shifting a single step behind the car. My stomach dropped. Ice flooding my veins, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, fogged and streaked, useless, reflecting nothing but the cab's dim glow. Another scrape, closer, deliberate, a drag of weight on stone, and my neck snapped around. Couldn't stop it, head turning sharp, breath held, eyes wide and wild, searching the dark beyond the back window. The fog pressed thick, swirling slow, but there, cutting through it, those eyes again, 10 yards back, glowing steady, unblinking, locked on me. The figures, outline, faint but taller, stiller, arms limp, head tilted, watching. I froze, lungs locked, a scream stuck in my throat, hands fumbling for the key again, twisting hard, the engine sputtering, catching for a second, then dying, a weak gasp that faded fast. The figure didn't move, just stood, those eyes burning through the mist, a silent weight that pressed the air, squeezed my chest, my mind racing. Run, stay, fight. None of it clear, none of it possible. Another scrape, closer, gravel crunching slow, and my eyes flicked to the side mirror, empty, fogged, then back to the window, the figure gone, the eyes gone, the dark swallowing them whole. Silence, thick, suffocating, my breath loud, ragged, fogging wild as I twisted the key once more, praying, pleading, the car shuddering, stalling, dead. The silence was a weight, thick, pressing, broken only by my breath, ragged and loud, fogging the cab in a quick, uneven plumes that smeared the windshield, streaking the glass with a faint sheen. The dashboard clock blinked, 11:53 p.m. 3 minutes since the engine died. 3 minutes since those eyes vanished into the fog behind me. 3 minutes of my heart slamming against my ribs. A frantic thud that echoed in my ears, drowning the faint plip, plip, plip of whatever leaked beneath the hood. My hands trembled, knuckles white, nails digging into the wheels, cracked vinyl, sweat pooling cold in my palms, dripping slow down my wrists, soaking the cuffs of my jacket. The air bit sharp, icy, damp, curling through the window's gap, carrying that sour rot stench, thicker now, clogging my throat, gagging me faint as I swallowed hard, tongue dry and heavy against my teeth. I couldn't sit here, not like this, not with the figure out there, somewhere in the dark, its eyes burned into my skull, a memory that wouldn't fade, those reflective points glaring through the fog, unblinking, alive. My neck prickled, sharp, insistent, a live wire that jolted every time I thought of turning, of looking back, but I didn't, couldn't. Eyes locked on the dash, on the fuel gauge's twitching needle, hovering just above empty, mocking me. The key dangled in the ignition, metal glinting dull under the cab's weak light, my fingers fumbling for it, twisting hard, the starter grinding again, a shrill screech that clawed the silence, then died, the engine coughing once, twice, before falling still, a hollow thunk reverberating through the frame. "Come on," I rasped, voice raw, breaking, slamming my palm on the wheel, the horn blaring short and sharp, a cry swallowed fast by the fog's dead hush. The car wasn't moving. Not tonight, not now. And that meant I had to move, had to check it, had to do something, anything, but wait for those eyes to reappear, closer, brighter, watching. My chest tightened, breath shallow, fast, hands fumbling for the door handle, slick with sweat, the latch clicking loud as I shoved it open, hinges squealing faint into the night. Cold hit me, hard, sudden. A slap of damp air that sank into my bones, my boots crunching gravel as I stepped out, legs stiff and shaky, jeans clinging wet from sweat or fog. I couldn't tell. The headlights glowed weak, flickering dim, casting long, trembling beams into the field ahead, fog swirling thick in their light. A living wall that swallowed the road, the horizon, everything but the car's sagging outline, its shadow stretching warped and thin across the dirt. I stood there, breath fogging thick, a plume that danced and faded, eyes darting to the side mirror, fogged over, useless, then to the hood, steam curling faint from its edges, a thin hiss mixing with the drip, drip, drip that pooled dark beneath the bumper, a slick stain spreading slow on the gravel. My stomach churned, nausea rising, sour and sharp, neck burning as I fought the urge to look back, to scan the dark, to find those eyes again. I couldn't, not yet. Instead, staggering forward, boots dragging, crunching loud, too loud. Each step, a gunshot in the stillness as I reached the hood, fingers fumbling for the latch, cold metal biting my skin, the release clicking soft as I yanked it up, hinges groaning, steam billowing out, hot and wet, stinging my eyes. I coughed, harsh, choking, waving the haze away, my flashlight pulled from my pocket, a cheap thing, its beam shaky and narrow, as I flicked it on, light cutting through the steam, glinting off pipes and belts, the engine a tangle of shadow and rust. My breath fogged fast, plumes swirling in the cold, hands trembling as I leaned in, the stench hitting me harder now, oil and coolant, bitter and sharp, mixed with that rot, that damp earth smell that clung to everything out here. The radiator hose, split, frayed, leaked slow, a thin stream dribbling down, pooling in the gravel below. The battery cables, loose, one terminal crusted green, sparking faint when I nudged it. "Shit," I muttered, voice shaking, teeth chattering faint, wiping sweat from my brow. The flashlight beam jittering as I scanned, searching for a fix, a hope, anything to get me out of here. Then, a scrape. Soft, deliberate, gravel shifting, maybe 10 yards back, behind the car. My spine locked, ice flooding my veins, flashlight dropping fast, clattering on the engine block, beam spinning wild, lights slashing across the hood, the road, the fog. I froze, breath held, ears straining. The sound gone, swallowed by the silence. But my neck burned fiercer now, a scream to turn, to look, to know. I couldn't, eyes locked on the engine, hands gripping the hood's edge, metal cold and slick under my palms, my pulse a roar, drowning everything else. Another scrape, closer, 5 yards, maybe less. A slow drag, a weight settling on stone, and my head snapped up. Couldn't stop it. Eyes wide, wild, darting to the rearview mirror on the driver's side. Fogged still, reflecting nothing but the cab's dim glow. I grabbed the flashlight, fingers clumsy, shaking, swinging it back, beam slicing through the fog, catching swirls and shadows, the road empty, gray, stretching into nothing. My breath fogged thick, fast, frantic, light trembling as I swept it, left, right, the field ahead, a blur of mist and dark, the car's taillights glowing red, faint, casting a bloody sheen on the gravel. Nothing, no shape, no eyes, just fog, thick and still, pressing closer. A wall I couldn't see through, my chest heaved, lungs burning, voice cracking as I whispered, "Who's there?" The words lost, feeble, swallowed, fast by the night. No echo, no answer, just the drip, drip, drip under the hood, steady and slow. I turned back, fast, desperate, flashlight beam, jerking to the engine, hands fumbling for the hose, the cables, anything to focus on, to keep moving, to not think about that sound, that scrape, that weight in the dark. My fingers brushed the battery, cold, wet, sparking faint again. A weak pop that jolted my hand back, the flashlight slipping, clattering to the gravel, beam rolling wild, lights spinning across the road, catching something, 2 points, bright and sharp, low to the ground, 10 yards back, glowing through the fog, unblinking, locked on me. My stomach dropped, bile rising, sour and hot, legs buckling faint as I gripped the hood, holding myself up, breath fogging wild, a plume that wouldn't fade. It was there, crouched again, closer than before, those eyes burning through the mist, reflective, wet, too bright, too alive. The figure's outline faint but solid, shoulders hunched, arms dangling, head tilted sharp, watching. My throat closed, voice gone, a whimper stuck as I stared. Flashlight beam steady now, pinning it in place, its pale skin glinting faint, a sheen under the light, fabric loose and torn, flapping slow though the air was. Still, dead. It didn't move, just crouched, eyes glaring, a silent promise that sank into my bones, a weight that wouldn't lift. My hands shook, flashlight trembling, beam jittering faint, neck prickling fierce, a pull to run, to scream, to fight. But my boots stayed rooted, gravel crunching faint as I shifted, the sound too loud, too real. I forced words, low, shaking. Stay back. Barely a whisper. Cracking mid-syllable, the figure, unmoving, those eyes unflinching, cutting through me, through the fog, through the dark. My flashlight beam held steady, desperate, sweat dripping cold down my spine, soaking my shirt, my breath, a fogged roar in the silence. Then a shift, subtle, slow, the figure's head tilting further, a crack of a bone, faint but sharp, its eyes dipping low, then rising, brighter, wider, as if it saw me clearer now, knew me. My chest, seized, lungs, locked, flashlight slipping, beam dipping, light slashing across the gravel, catching something else, a mark, carved deep into the road's edge, old and weathered, a crude triangle with a slash through it, glinting wet under the beam, a stain I hadn't seen before. I stumbled back, boots slipping, crunching loud, hood slamming shut with a bang that echoed, sharp and hollow. My hands fumbling for the door, eyes darting from the mark to the figure, still crouched, still watching, those eyes burning steady, unblinking. My heart pounded, fierce, frantic, fingers clawing the handle, yanking it open, diving inside, door slamming hard, lock clicking loud as I twisted the key again, the engine sputtering, coughing, a weak growl that wouldn't catch. The fog pressed thicker, swirling slow outside the windows, my breath fogging wild, fogging the glass. The figure's eyes still there, still glowing, closer now, 8 yards, maybe less. A shadow in a mist that wouldn't fade, wouldn't leave. The key twisted, hard, frantic, metal, grinding in the ignition. The engine sputtering, a weak, wet cough that choked and died. A hollow thud reverberating through the cab as my breath fogged wild, smearing the windshield, streaking the glass with a frantic haze. The dashboard clock blinked 11:58 p.m. 5 minutes since I'd slammed the door shut. 5 minutes since those eyes glared closer through the fog. 5 minutes of my heart slamming against my ribs. A relentless thud that drowned the drip, drip, drip from under the hood. Now a faint echo in the silence. My hands shook, knuckles pale, nails biting into my palms, sweat dripping cold down my temples, soaking my collar. The air inside the cab icy and thick, damp with that rot stench. Sharper now, clawing at my throat, gagging me as I swallowed hard, tongue sticking dry to the roof of my mouth. The figure was out there, 8 yards back, maybe less. Those eyes burning through the fog, unblinking, reflective points that cut the dark, locked on me. A weight I could feel, pressing through the rear window, through the locked door, through the glass fogged thick with my breath. My neck prickled, fierce, electric. I screamed to turn, to look, but I didn't. Couldn't. Eyes darting instead to the side mirror, streaked and useless. Then to the dash. The fuel gauge's needle twitching near empty, a mocking flicker under the dim cab light. I twisted the key again, desperate, pleading. The starter screeching shrill, a metallic wail that clawed the silence. The engine rumbling faint for a second, then stalling, a gasp that faded fast, leaving just my pulse, loud and fast. A roar in my ears. Work, damn it, I rasped, voice cracking raw, slamming my fist on the dash, the plastic creaking loud, the horn blaring short and sharp. A cry swallowed fast by the fog's dead hush. My chest heaved, lungs burning, hands fumbling for the key once more, twisting, grinding, the engine coughing again, a weak sputter that wouldn't catch, wouldn't live. The fog pressed thicker, swirling slow outside the windows, a living shroud that swallowed the road, the fields, everything but the car's trembling outline. Its headlights flickering faint, casting jagged beams into the gray, catching nothing but mist and shadow. My breath fogged faster, plumes curling wild, neck burning as I fought the pull to look back, to see those eyes again, closer, brighter, waiting. That mark, carved in the gravel, a crude triangle with a slash through it, flashed in my mind, glinting wet under the flashlight's beam, old and weathered, a scar in the dirt I couldn't unsee. My stomach twisted, cold, nauseous, fingers trembling as I gripped the wheel, the vinyl creaking it under my palms, sweat pooling slick and cold. What was it? A sign, a warning, something left behind. My brain scrambled, fragments of memory clawing up, vague and blurry. A story I'd heard years back, half listened to over a diner counter, coffee cold in my hands. Some old guy's voice droning low about these back roads, about something lost out here, something that didn't leave. They called it the Watcher, he'd said, words fuzzy now, slipping, marked the roads where it waited, eyes like mirrors, never blinked. I'd laughed then, quiet, dismissive, shaking it off as rural bullshit, ghost stories for truckers and drunks. Now it's stuck, sharp, real, a splinter in my skull I couldn't pull out. A scrape, soft, close, gravel, shifting maybe 6 yards back behind the car. My spine locked, ice flooding my veins, breath held, ears straining, the sound gone fast, swallowed by the silence. But my neck burned fiercer, a jolt that wouldn't fade. Another scrape, closer, 5 yards, a slow drag, deliberate, a weight settling on stone, and my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, fogged, streaked, useless, reflecting nothing but the cab's dim glow. My own wide eyes, staring back, pupils blown, rimmed red. My hands fumbled for the flashlight, dropped on the passenger seat, fingers clumsy, shaking, beam flicking on, slashing wild through the cab, light bouncing off the glass, catching my breath's fog in a frantic swirl. I swung it back, fast, desperate, beam cutting through the rear window, piercing the fog, catching swirls and shadows, the road empty, gray, stretching into nothing. My breath fogged thick, ragged, fast, light trembling as I swept it. Left, right, the field behind a blur of mist and dark. The taillights are glowing red, faint, casting a bloody sheen on the gravel. Nothing, no shape, no eyes, just fog, pressing closer. A wall that breathed slow, alive. My chest tightened, voice cracking as I whispered, "Stay away." Words lost, feeble, dissolving into the silence. No echo, no answer, just the drip, drip, drip under the hood. A steady pulse that mocked my own. The mark, triangle slashed, burned in my head, pulling my eyes down, out the driver's window, to the gravel's edge where I'd seen it, where the flashlight had caught it, wet and deep. I leaned, slow, shaking, flashlight beam tilting, slicing through the fogged glass, light jittering faint as I aimed it outside, sweeping the road's shoulder, searching. There, a glint 3 yards off, carved sharp in the dirt. The triangle's lines jagged, uneven, the slash cutting diagonal, dark with damp, like it bled into the stone. My throat closed, a dry choke. Beam, lingering, trembling, catching something else. Faint scratches around it, older marks, half erased by time, a cluster of scars that stretched into the fog, toward the field, toward the dark. My mind raced, breath shallow, fast. That old guy's voice, echoing clearer now, rough and low. They said it marked its ground, roads nobody took no more, places folks forgot. Once you saw it, it saw you back. My stomach dropped, bile rising, sour and hot, hands gripping the flashlight tighter, beam steady on the mark, its edges glinting wet, too fresh, too real. Was it here before? Had I driven over it, past it, blind in the fog? My neck prickled sharper, a scream to turn, to check. And this time I couldn't fight it. Head snapping back, eyes wide, wild, flashlight beam slashing through the rear window, light cutting the fog, catching them. Those eyes, 6 yards back, glowing bright, unblinking, locked on me. It stood, taller now, rigid, shoulders hunched, arms dangling past its knees, head cocked sharp. Those reflective points glaring through the mist, wet and alive, piercing the beam. My chest seized, lungs locked. A scream stuck as I stared, flashlight trembling, light pinning it in place, its pale skin glinting faint, a sheen under the glow, fabric loose and torn, flapping slow in the still air. It didn't move, just stood, eyes burning, a silent weight that sank into my skull, my bones, my blood. My throat rasped, voice gone. No, no, no. Barely a whisper, cracking faint, the figure, unmoving, those eyes unflinching, cutting through me, through the fog, through the dark. A crack, sharp, sudden, its head tilting further, bone popping faint, a sound that sliced the silence, its eyes dipping low, then rising, brighter, wider, as if it saw deeper now, knew me better. My hand shook, flashlight slipping, beam dipping, light slashing across the gravel, catching its feet, bare, pale, toes curled inward, rooted to the stone. My stomach churned, nausea surging, legs trembling as I fumbled the key again, twisting hard, the engine sputtering, coughing, a weak growl that wouldn't catch. The fog thickened, swirling faster now, my breath fogging wild, fogging the glass, the figure's eyes still there, still glowing, closer now, 5 yards, maybe less, a shadow in a mist that grew sharper, taller, realer. I slammed the horn, hard, desperate, sound blaring loud, echoing the sharp through the fog, a cry that faded fast, swallowed whole. The figure didn't flinch, didn't blink, those eyes steady, burning, its head tilting again. Another crack, faint but clear, its mouth twitching faint, a thin line cracking open, pale lips parting, slow, no sound, no breath, just a gap, a void. My pulse roared, fierce, frantic, hands clawing the wheel, the key, the flashlight, anything to hold, to fight, to move. The engine sputtered again, weak, dying, a gasp that wouldn't live, and the figure stepped, slow, deliberate, gravel crunching, soft, 4 yards now, its eyes brighter, wider, locked on me, a promise I couldn't unsee, couldn't escape. The engine's last sputter died. A weak, wet gasp that faded into silence, leaving just my breath, ragged and loud, fogging the cabin, frantic plumes that smeared the windshield, streaking the glass with a trembling haze. The dashboard clock blinked 12:03 a.m. 10 minutes since those eyes glared 4 yards back. 10 minutes since that mouth twitched open. 10 minutes of my heart slamming against my ribs, a relentless thud that drowned the faint drip, drip, drip from under the hood. Now a ghost in the stillness. My hands shook, knuckles white, nails gouging the wheels vinyl, sweat dripping cold down my spine, soaking my shirt, the air inside icy and thick, damp with that rot stench, sharper now, clawing my lungs, gagging me as I swallowed hard, throat dry and raw. The figure was there, 4 yards, maybe less, those eyes burning through the fog, unblinking, reflective points that pierced the rear window, locked on me, a weight that pressed my skull, my chest, my bones. My neck prickled, fierce, electric. A scream to turn, to look, but I wouldn't. Eyes darting instead to the flashlight on the seat. Beam off, useless now. Then to the key, dangling limp in the ignition, mocking me. I twisted it again, desperate, pleading, the starter grinding shrill, a metallic wail that clawed the silence, the engine coughing once, then stalling, a hollow thunk that shook the frame. No, I rasped, voice breaking, hoarse, slamming my palm on the dash, the horn blaring short and sharp, a cry swallowed fast by the fog's dead hush. I couldn't stay, not here, not with it stepping closer, gravel crunching soft, those eyes growing brighter, wider, knowing me. My chest heaved, lungs burning, hands fumbling for the door handle, slick with sweat, the latch clicking loud as I shoved it open, hinges squealing faint into the night. Cold hit me, hard, sudden, a wall of damp air that sank into my skin, my boots crunching gravel as I stumbled out, legs shaky, weak, jeans clinging wet from sweat and fog, boots slipping faint on the stone. The headlights flickered, dim, dying, casting trembling beams into the field ahead, fog swirling thick in their light, a shroud that swallowed the road, the car's sagging outline, its shadow stretching warped and thin across the dirt. I stood, breath fogging thick, a plume that danced and faded, eyes darting to the side mirror, fogged over, useless, then back to the car, steam curling faint from the hood, a thin hiss mixing with the drip, drip, drip that pooled dark beneath, a slick stain glinting wet. My stomach churned, nausea surging, sour and hot, neck burning as I fought the urge to look back, to see those eyes again, closer, brighter, waiting. I couldn't fix the car, not now, not like this. Not with my hands shaking, my mind racing, that mark, triangle, slashed, burning in my skull, the old guy's voice echoing. Once you saw it, it saw you back. My legs moved, staggering, clumsy, boots crunching, loud, too loud. Each step, a gunshot in the stillness as I lurched forward, away from the car, into the fog, into the gray. The road stretched ahead, narrow, endless, gravel fading to dirt, then grass, wet and slick under my boots, soaking through the leather, chilling my feet. My breath fogged wild, fast, frantic, lungs aching as I pushed on, flashlight clutched tight, beam flicking on, slashing shaky through the mist, catching swirls and shadows. The field on either side, a blur of dark and gray. No edges, no end. My neck prickled sharper. I pulled a turn to check, but I didn't, couldn't. Eyes locked ahead, on the beam, on the ground, on anything but the car, the figure, those eyes. The air grew colder, biting, damp, rot stench, thicker now, mixed with wet earth, grass, a sour whiff that stung my nose, clung to my throat, gagged me faint. A scrape, soft, close. Gravel shifting, maybe 10 yards back, behind me. My spine locked, ice flooding my veins, boots faltering, slipping, faint, breath held, ears straining, the sound gone fast, swallowed by the silence. Another scrape, closer, 8 yards. A slow drag, deliberate, a weight on stone, and my head snapped around. Couldn't stop it. Flashlight beam slashing wild, light cutting the fog, catching them. Those eyes, 8 yards back, glowing bright, unblinking, locked on me. It stood, taller, rigid, shoulders hunched, arms dangling, head cocked sharp, its pale skin glinting faint, fabric loose and torn, flapping slow in the still air, those reflective points burning through the mist, piercing the beam, my chest, seized, lungs locked, a scream stuck as I stumbled back, boots slipping, crunching loud, flashlight, trembling beam jittering faint, pinning it in place. It stepped, slow, deliberate, gravel, crunching, soft, 7 yards now. Its eyes brighter, wider, its head tilting further, a crack of bone, faint but sharp, its mouth twitching again, parting slow, a thin gap. No sound, no breath, just a void. My throat rasped, voice gone. Stay back. Barely a whisper, cracking faint. The figure unmoving for a second, then stepping again, 6 yards. Gravel, crunching louder, its arms swaying faint. Too long, too limp, brushing the ground. I turned, fast, desperate, boots slipping, running now, flashlight beam bouncing wild, lights slashing across the road, the field, the fog, my breath fogging thick, a plume that wouldn't fade, my legs burned, muscles screaming, lungs heaving as I pushed on, the road curving slight, dirt giving way to mud, wet and heavy, sucking at my boots, slowing me, each step a slog, a fight. The fog thickened, swirling faster, visibility shrinking, the beam catching nothing but gray, my pulse roaring, drowning the silence, the crunch of my steps, the drip of sweat down my face. Another scrape, closer, 5 yards back, maybe less. A steady crunch now, matching my pace, deliberate, relentless. I swung the flashlight, wild, frantic, beam slashing back, catching those eyes. 5 yards, brighter, wider, burning through the fog. The figure clearer now, its pale face glinting, faint, hollow cheeks, eyes sunken deep, mouth open, wider, a dark slit, no teeth, no sound. My stomach dropped, bile rising, legs buckling faint as I pushed harder, boots slipping, mud splashing cold up my shins, the road stretching endless. No lights, no signs, just fog and dark. The beam caught something ahead, 10 yards, a glint in the dirt, another mark, triangle, slashed, carved deep, wet and dark, surrounded by scratches. Older, fainter, stretching into the field like a trail. My mind raced, breath shallow, fast. That old guy's voice clawing up, clearer now. They found marks, dozens, roads nobody took, where it walked, where it waited. My chest tightened, lungs burning, flashlight beam, lingering on the mark, trembling, catching more. 3 yards left. Another triangle, smaller, fresher, glinting wet. Then another, a line of them, leading off the road, into the field, into the fog. My neck burned, a scream to turn, and I did. Flashlight slashing back, catching those eyes. 4 yards now, closer, brighter. The figure's head tilted sharp, mouth open wide, far. A black void, its steps crunching steady, relentless, matching mine. I stumbled, boots slipping, falling hard, mud splashing cold, flashlight dropping, beam rolling wild, light spinning across the field, catching grass, fog, then them, those eyes, 3 yards, looming tall, rigid, arms dangling, mouth gaping, pale face glinting wet, reflective points burning down at me. My throat closed, a dry choke. Hands clawing the mud, slipping, scrambling back, boots kicking frantic. The figure stepping closer, 2 yards. Gravel, crunching soft, its head tilting again. A crack of bone, loud and sharp. Its eyes, widening, knowing me, seeing me. A promise I couldn't escape. Mud clung to my hands, cold, wet, heavy. Fingers slipping as I clawed the ground. Boots kicking frantic, splashing thick and dark up my legs, soaking through jeans, chilling my skin. My breath, fogged wild, ragged, fast, lungs burning, as I scrambled back, away from those eyes, 3 yards close, glowing bright, unblinking, piercing the fog above me, locked on my every twitch, my every gasp. The flashlight lay yards off, beams spinning wild, slashing grass and mist, catching glints of the figure's pale face, hollow cheeks, mouth gaping wide, a black void, its head tilted sharp, bone cracking faint, a sound that sliced the silence, sank into my skull, my spine, my blood, my throat closed, a dry choke, voice gone, a scream stuck as I pushed up, stumbled to my feet, boots slipping, sinking, the field swallowing me, slow, grass wet and tall, brushing my thighs, snagging my clothes. The figure stepped, 2 yards now, gravel crunching soft, then silent, its bare feet sinking into mud, arms dangling limp, swaying faint, too long, too thin, brushing the ground. Those eyes burned brighter, reflective, wet, widening as its head tilted further. Another crack, louder, sharper, its mouth stretching, a dark slit growing. No sound, no breath, it's just a promise, a weight that pressed my chest, crushed my ribs, stole my air. My legs shook, knees buckling faint, hands clawing air as I turned, staggering forward, deeper into the field, away from the road, away from the car, away from those marks, triangle, slashed, that trailed me, haunted me, led me here. The fog thickened, swirling fast. A gray wall that shrank the world, swallowed the beam's faint glow, left me blind, lost, running into nothing. Grass lashed my legs, sharp, wet, cutting faint at my skin, soaking my boots, my socks, my shins, mud sucking loud with every step. A wet squelch that echoed in the stillness, matched the thud of my pulse, loud and fierce, a roar in my ears. My breath fogged thick, plumes curling wild, lungs aching, screaming as I pushed on. Flashlight lost behind, its light a fading pinprick, swallowed by the dark, the fog, the field. The air bit colder, icy, damp, rot stench, stronger now, mixed with wet earth, decay, a sour whiff that gagged me, clung to my throat, my nose, my lungs. My neck prickled, sharp, electric, a pull to turn, to look, but I couldn't. Eyes locked ahead, on the gray, on the grass, on the endless stretch of nothing, a scrape, soft, close, mud, shifting, maybe 5 yards back. My spine locked, ice flooding my veins, boots faltering, slipping faint, breath held, ears straining, the sound steady now, a slow drag, deliberate, matching my pace. Another step, 4 yards, wet squelch louder, closer, and my head snapped around. Couldn't stop it. Eyes wide, wild, peering through the fog, catching them. Those eyes, 4 yards back, glowing bright, unblinking, locked on me. It moved, taller, rigid, shoulders hunched, arms swaying, head cocked sharp, its pale face glinting wet, mouth open, wide, a black void, swallowing light, those reflective points burning through the mist, piercing my skull, my soul, my chest seized, lungs locked, a scream breaking free, raw and hoarse. Get away. Words tearing my throat, dissolving fast into the fog. No echo, no answer, just the squelch, squelch, squelch of its steps. 3 yards now, relentless, steady, its head tilting again, a crack of bone, loud and sharp. its mouth stretching wider, a dark maw, no end. I turned, fast, desperate, boots slipping, running harder, grass lashing fierce, mud sucking deep, my legs burning, trembling, threatening to give. The fog swirled, thicker, faster, visibility gone, the world a gray blur, my breath fogging wild, a plume that wouldn't fade, my pulse roaring, drowning everything, the squelch of my steps, the crunch of grass, the silence between. Something caught my boot, hard, sudden, a jolt that pitched me forward, hands flailing, slamming into mud, grass, a cold splash up my arms, my chest, my face, my breath, hitched, sharp, shallow, fingers clawing, finding it, a root, thick and gnarled, twisting up from the earth, glinting wet under my touch, dark with damp, old and weathered. My eyes darted, wild, frantic, tracing it, seeing more, roots sprawling, a tangle of scars in the mud, leading somewhere deeper into the field, into the fog. My stomach dropped, bile rising, mind racing, that old guy's voice, clawing up, rough and low. They found a tree, dead, twisted, where it came from, where it stayed. Roots marked the ground, held it there. My chest tightened, lungs burning, hands trembling as I pushed up, mud dripping cold from my fingers, my neck prickling fierce, a scream to turn. A squelch, close, 2 yards back, mud shifting, grass rustling faint. My head snapped, eyes wide, catching those eyes. 2 yards, brighter, wider, burning down at me, the figure looming tall, rigid, arms dangling, swaying faint, its pale face glinting wet, mouth gaping, a black void swallowing fog, its head tilted sharp, bone cracking loud, a sound that shook the air, sank into my bones. My throat rasped, voice gone. No, no, no. Barely a whisper, cracking faint, as it stepped. 1 yard, mud squelching loud, its bare feet sinking deep, toes curled inward, pale and wet, brushing my boot. My legs kicked, frantic, wild, slipping, scrambling back, hands clawing mud, grass, roots, anything to hold, to pull, to flee. The beam, faint, distant, caught something, yards back, rolling still, slashing wild, glinting off a shape. A tree, dead and twisted, bark black and peeling, branches jagged, clawing the fog, roots sprawling wide, tangling the field, marking the ground. My mind spun, breath shallow, fast. That voice again, held it there, tied it to the roots, to the dark. My chest heaved, lungs screaming, eyes darting from the tree to the figure, 1 yard close, its eyes widening, reflective points flaring bright, its mouth stretching, a low hum rising, soft, faint, a vibration that shook the air, the mud, my skull, growing louder, deeper, a sound that wasn't sound, a weight that wasn't weight. I scrambled, boots slipping, hands clawing, pushing back, away, the hum pulsing fierce, rattling my teeth, my bones, my blood, the figure stepping again, 1/2 yard, its arms swaying, brushing my leg, cold and wet, a touch that burned, froze, stole my breath, my scream broke, raw, ragged. Stop! Tearing free, lost in the hum, the fog, the dark, as it leaned, slow, deliberate, head tilting further, a bone cracking sharp, mouth gaping wide, the hum surging, a wave that drowned me, pinned me, held me, those eyes burning bright, unblinking, knowing me, seeing me, claiming me. Mud sucked me down, cold, heavy, hands slipping, roots cutting my palms, my legs pinned, trembling, the figure's face, inches now, pale and wet, eyes flaring wide, mouth a black void, the hum, a roar, shaking the field, the fog, the world. My chest seized, lungs locked, vision blurring, fogging, the tree's shadow looming faint, roots sprawling, marks in the earth, a prison, a tether, a truth I couldn't grasp, couldn't escape. The hum lingered, a low, bone-deep vibration, fading slow from my skull, my chest, my blood, leaving a hollow ache, a weight that wouldn't lift, as my hands clawed mud, cold and slick, fingers slipping on roots, grass, anything to pull me free, my breath fogged wild, ragged, shallow, lungs burning, screaming as I kicked back, boots slipping, splashing thick and dark, the figure's touch, cold, wet, still burning faint on my leg, a ghost of contact that prickled, sharp, sank into my skin, my nerves, my mind, those eyes, inches close, reflective, unblinking, burned in my vision, a memory that wouldn't fade, wide and wet, glaring through the fog, through me, knowing me, claiming me, my throat rasped, voice gone, a whimper stuck as I scrambled, pushed, dragged myself up, mud sucking at my knees, my shins, my hands, the field holding tight, unwilling to let go. It stood there, half a yard back, tall, rigid, shoulders hunched, arms dangling limp, swaying faint, its pale face glinting wet, mouth gaping wide, a black void, swallowing fog, its head tilted sharp, bones silent now, no crack, no hum, just stillness, a weight in the air, pressing me down, my chest heaved, lungs locked, eyes darting from its face to the tree, yards off, dead and twisted, bark black and peeling, roots sprawling wide, tangling the field, marking the ground, a tether, a prison, a truth I couldn't grasp. The fog swirled, thick, slow, a gray shroud that clung to the grass, the mud, the air, shrinking the world, blurring the tree's jagged outline, its branches clawing faint at the mist, a shadow that loomed, watched, waited. I pushed, hard, desperate, boots slipping, sinking, then catching, a root snapping, aloud, under my weight, a sharp crack that echoed in the silence, jolted my spine, my neck, my pulse, my legs trembled, weak, burning, mud dripping cold from my hands, my jeans, my face, as I staggered forward, deeper into the field, away from those eyes, that touch, that hum. The air, bit colder, icy, damp, rot stench, fading faint, replaced by wet earth, grass, a cleaner chill that stung my nose, my throat, my lungs, my breath fogged thick, plumes curling slow, vision blurring, fogging, the flashlight's beam lost behind, swallowed whole, leaving me blind, stumbling, running into gray, into nothing. Grass lashed my legs, wet, sharp, snagging my clothes, slowing me, each step a fight, a slog, mud squelching soft now, less deep, the ground firming faint beneath my boots, sloping up, a rise I couldn't see, couldn't place. My pulse roared, fierce, frantic, ears straining, listening, no squelch, no scrape, no crunch behind, just silence, thick and still, a void that pressed my skull, my ribs, my breath, my neck prickled, sharp, electric, a pull to turn, to check, and I did, slow, shaking, head twisting faint, eyes wide, wild, peering through the fog, searching for those eyes, that face, that shape. Nothing, gray, endless, fog, swirling slow, grass swaying faint, no glow, no glint, no shadow, just emptiness, a quiet that sank into me, heavy and cold. I stopped, boots sinking faint, breath fogging fast, a plume that hung, wouldn't fade, my chest heaving, lungs aching, hands trembling as I wiped mud from my face, my eyes streaking wet across my skin, the field stretched, dark, blurred, fog thinning faint at the edges, a dull glow breaking through, faint and far, a hint of light, a road, a way out. My stomach twisted, hope, fear, a knot that wouldn't loosen, my legs moving again, staggering, clumsy, boots crunching grass, then gravel, the rise leveling off, the ground hardening, a path, a ribbon of dirt, cutting back to the world. My breath hitched, sharp, shallow, eyes darting, searching, the car's shape looming faint through the mist, yards off, headlights dim, flickering. A beacon I'd left, a cage I'd fled, a sound, soft, distant, a hum, faint and low, rising slow from the field behind, a vibration that tickled the air, the ground, my bones, my spine locked, ice flooding my veins, head snapping back, eyes wide, catching a glint, far off, 50 yards, maybe more. Those eyes, glowing faint, unblinking, locked on me. The figure's outline blurred, hunched. Still, its head tilted sharp, mouth open wide, the hum pulsing soft, a thread that wouldn't break, wouldn't fade. My throat closed, a dry choke. Legs trembling as I turned, pushed, ran, boots crunching gravel, loud, too loud, each step a gunshot in the stillness. The car closer now, 20 yards, 10, its door still open, swinging faint in the fog's breath. I dove, fast, desperate, slamming into the cab, hands fumbling the door shut, lock clicking loud, key twisting hard, the engine coughing, sputtering, a weak growl that caught, finally, alive, a rumble that shook the frame, the headlights flaring bright, slashing through the fog, my breath fogged, wild, ragged, fast, hands gripping the wheel, mud streaking the vinyl, the dash, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror, fogged, streaked, useless, then, out the window, back to the field, the hum fading faint, the eyes gone, swallowed by the gray, the dark, the mist. The car lurched, tires spinning, gravel spitting, jerking forward, the road stretching ahead, narrow, endless, fog swirling slow, a tunnel I couldn't see through, couldn't escape. Miles past, blurred, numb, the clock blinking 12:47 a.m. The fuel gauge twitching low, the engine rumbling steady, a lifeline I clung to, my hand shaking, neck prickling still, a weight that wouldn't lift. The fog thinned, slow, reluctant, fields giving way to trees, then signs, a gas station's neon glow, faint and far, a world I'd lost, found again. I pulled in, boots crunching gravel, engine idling rough, my breath fogging faint now, calmer, slower, the air cleaner, colder, rot stench gone, replaced by gas, oil, a hint of normalcy. My chest heaved, lungs aching, eyes darting back to the road, the fog, the dark, nothing there, no eyes, no hum, no marks, just silence, a quiet I didn't trust. The attendant, old, grizzled, glanced at me, my mud-streaked face, my trembling hands, his voice, low, rough. You look like you've seen something out there. My throat tightened. Words stuck, mind flashing to the mark, the tree, the eyes, that hum, the old guy's voice echoing. Once you saw it, it saw you back. I nodded, slow, faint, muttering, yeah, something. Voice hoarse, cracking, eyes darting to the pump, the road, the fog lingering faint at the horizon, a gray smear that watched, waited. He grunted, short, sharp, pointing to a scratch on the car's door, a crude triangle slashed through, glinting wet under the station's light, fresh, deep, a mark I hadn't seen, hadn't felt. My stomach dropped, bile rising, neck burning as I stared, the hum echoing faint in my skull, a ghost of sound, a thread that wouldn't break. I drove off, fast, desperate, road stretching ahead, fog fading slow, the mark glinting in my mirror, the eyes gone, the figure gone, but not gone, not really. A weight in the dark, a promise in the silence, a truth I'd carry, couldn't shake, couldn't unsee.